Recording in progress. Did you hear that, American lady? Hello, Bonita. Hi, guys. Thank you all for joining us today. I have my beautiful, beautiful friend, Dr. Venita Patel. She's a fantastic person. She's a paediatrician, but I'm gonna let her tell you a little bit about who she is.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity and invitation. So yes, as Ashby said, I am a paediatrician, but I'm not a conventional one by any means, because I took time out of my training and trained as a nutritional therapist, and essentially was working as a nutritional therapist until I went back into community paediatrics, which is my area of work in the NHS, which is all about children's development. And we also do talk a lot about sleep. So this is why this topic is very appropriate for me to kind of delve into.
Yeah.
But as a nutritional therapist, we really do go into a lot about sleep as well. So it's not just what you eat and why you eat it, it's about how it relates to your whole day and night. And I never knew any of this as a doctor until I learned nutritional therapy, and did some training as a functional medicine specialist as well. And I think that's where we met, isn't it, Ashley?
Absolutely. So why do you, if you don't mind, quick caveat, which I knew is what would happen, because I just would love to know in your personal thing is, why do you think we're not talking about this in pediatric training? I mean, you'd think as a pediatrician and a GP and a pediatrician, the two most important specialties, there should be whole modules and seminars on sleep and light and circadian rhythm. Why is this not happening, Bonita?
Well, it is beginning to happen, which is the good news. So there are very good courses which are run. One is in Southampton and in London. So they are beginning to see that this is an area we need to really understand. And I'm fortunate to work in a trust where we have an amazing sleep service. So there's a fantastic paediatrician, Mike Farquhar, who runs the hospital paediatric service, and he's really promoted the importance of understanding children's sleep issues, knowing how to support children with these problems. And we also now have a community-led sleep service. So we are seeing children who have an additional difficulty, such as a neurodevelopmental difficulty, neurodiversity, so ADHD, autism, and but that information, that knowledge translates to all children. So that's the good news, that we are actually putting a lot more focus and funding, which is the other thing behind this. Before, I think it was just health visitors for the under fives.
These services that you mentioned, are they available for anyone? How can people kind of go to their GP and say, oh, we heard this doctor pediatrician say there was a sleep clinic. How can we, I mean, how does that work?
The Guy's and St Thomas's Evelina Hospital one is tertiary referral, so you can be referred. There are other ones.
You have to go via your GP or via pediatrician to get there?
You would go via your GP, and they could either refer you firstly if you have a local service, because there are paediatricians who are now having a special interest, and then if that's something that's not enough, they haven't got the ability to help you, they could then refer you on. So it's tertiary for the hospital. Unfortunately, our community service is only for the area that I work, so it's Lambeth and Southwark. But hopefully the model, which we've now got data on, is going to be spread far and wide, because it's being published and there's a lot of interest now.
And that's really, really good news. I mean, sometimes I do get a little bit annoyed, if I'm honest, that there needs to be a model. Like, this is just common sense at the end of the day. We are the only mammals that don't seem to understand the importance of sleep. It's frustrating that you need models and this and trials and data on things like nutrition, sleep, stress management. But anyway, that is what it is. So you mentioned ADHD, autism, stuff like that. But generally, as a pediatrician, I mean, what would you say that you've really observed in children, not necessarily these kind of diagnoses, but just general stuff in children from lack of sleep?
So, well, there's a twofold thing. So sleep and behavior and learning are all interlinked. So if you have a child who isn't having optimal sleep for whatever reason, then their behavior can change, if you like. We never say bad behavior, because it's just behavior. And that can then increase their sort of stress hormones and their stress responses, which in turn then impacts the sleep again. So you're kind of going in that cycle. And then you have the additional things of what we were going to talk about is things like screens. So the sort of gaming and that sort of thing, which again has an additional impact on that.
Yeah.
And I think that we have this love-hate relationship with screens and with devices, and children are growing up now who've not known anything else. That's how the world is. We all have a device stuck to us. And that's definitely a change. So my children didn't know that world when they were younger.
Yeah.
But when I see now, that's all they know. You know, when they're in clinic with me, if they're crying or, you know, not letting their parents speak, immediately the first thing that comes is hand them our phone or an iPad you brought along or something like that. So it's almost a knee-jerk reaction now.
It's quite scary, isn't it? I mean, I 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing a clinic once, and I think there was like she was a 1-year-old kid, and she came in and she's, you know, her immune system was shocked, always getting infections and stuff like that. And like you said, she started crying in the consultation. So dad was like, okay, don't worry, one minute, doc, 1 minute. Gave her the phone. She was not even one, Venita. She swiped, she this, she that. And you know what? But dad was really proud of her. He's like, oh, look, she knows how to use an iPhone. And I'm thinking, she's here because of, so I guess what I wanted to know, as well as the behavioral issues when children are not sleeping properly, what about the physiological changes? Like, do you think that kids' recurrent infections, ear infections, obesity, allergies, all of this stuff, which is just so much on the rise, it's not even funny. Do you think sleep and screen usage has got something to do with that?
So definitely, as you know, as part of my NHS work, we run this children's obesity clinic. We call it the Healthy Weight Service. And what we are seeing, we always look into sleep in detail, and we ask a lot about the sort of things like sleep apnea and all of those things. So is the sleep being disturbed, but without the child knowing? And there is, again, that link between having broken sleep and the profile of your sort of appetite hormones in the daytime, in terms of your leptin and your ghrelin, where you do seem to have less satiety in the daytime. So you are craving more frequent meals or more frequent snacks, etc. So we've seen that in terms of sleep and BMI. We then also know that your gut is in the night is when your microbiome is replenishing, and your gut is the most important factor in terms of immunity. So if you're not allowing the replenishment of your bacteria, then your immune system will naturally be impacted to a greater or lesser extent. So we can't directly say, oh, because they haven't slept, they've got a cold, but we know in ourselves that when we're not sleeping as well, we're more prone.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically another huge risk factor alongside all the other lifestyle stuff. So how would a parent, like say, so in adults, I still have this thing, okay, because I don't believe many of us are sleeping well, and I really don't believe many of us are managing our stress well. I think there's the two big S's, that food was the passion that got me started on lifestyle medicine, but it's probably the easiest thing. I don't even go there anymore now because it's not that hard. People struggle with sleep. How would a parent necessarily know, apart from their, you know, obviously as kids get older and they get a bit more vocal about it, you know, like some kids, they fall asleep straight away, and they sleep through the nights, kinda. How would a parent necessarily know that their child is not sleeping optimally? Any other trick, any other kind of clues or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. There are a few signs. So one sign that we ask about is nighttime wetting. So we know that there is this sort of statistic thrown around that 10% of 5-year-olds and 5% of 10-year-olds it's a normal statistic for them to be nighttime wetting.
Right.
But nobody's actually looked at why, and what is there another reason why they're waking, or why they're too deep and not realizing that they've got a full bladder. So that could be a sign, and we know that there's a link to things like a food intolerance that we should be thinking about.
Oh wow.
The other thing is in terms of sleep sort of terrors and sleep and nightmares, though that could be a sign as well. Obviously we know that there's the psychological link, so we think about what's happening in the daytime to affect their quality of sleep. And the other thing is in the morning. So do you have a child who's refreshed? Do they seem ready for the day? Or is it a real struggle to get them up? Now, in children, that's a big sign. If it's a real struggle to get them up and they've gone to bed at a reasonable time, and as far as you know, they haven't been awake doing all sorts in the night, then there's a clue there. So
that makes complete sense, right? If you think about it, us adults, we don't like sleep, right? It's boring. Sleep's for the you sleep when you're dead and all that kind of nonsense that I used to say. And you know, we got to go to work the next day and start housework and whatnot. Whereas kids are like going to go see their friends, they're going to go to school. So yeah, they should be energized. They should wake up quite naturally as well, right? Like you shouldn't have to like
them to get up. Yes, they might not want to get up and get dressed and go to school. They might want to play, but that's fine.
They want to get up. They don't want to stay in bed and
alert.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
So ask those questions. Do they snore? That sort of thing as well.
What can snoring be? I mean, we know that snoring is what's the big deal about snoring anyway? I mean, what's actually happening when people snore?
Yeah, firstly, it's not normal for a child to snore. There is something pathological going on if there is snoring at night on a regular basis, obviously, not cold or something.
Yeah.
And is there a reason why they are snoring and then having a possible episode of sleep apnea, which is when you snore and then have a break where you don't hear them breathe. Now, obviously, parents are always not always sleeping next to their children to hear them, so they don't always know to report that, which is why if we're really worried, we can do something like a sleep study. Now, the things that they're looking at are there huge tonsils and adenoids, which are then, you know, everything's relaxing and then it's
kind of
actually a physical obstruction. And then is it because there's a child with a high BMI, so they actually just have the weight on their neck and their throat? So those are the two commonest things that we're going to be looking for. But as a nutritional therapist, I know I'm going to also think about, have they got some immune system issues, which is why they naturally always seem to have enlarged glands, which could be, you know, again, a dairy intolerance.
I was going to say the food intolerances are massive on that, especially dairy. I mean, you know, I abhor sometimes because I see these patients in the urgent care centres and, you know, they're like 3 years old and they're about to go and have a tonsillectomy. You know, they've had like 5 episodes of tonsillitis and I'm like, has anybody told you to give up cow dairy? No? What's that got to do with it? And it's like palm slap, because it's very, very inflammatory on these tissues, isn't it, dairy, unfortunately? Yeah, as tasty as it is. But
some children more prone than others, and it depends on what form of dairy as well.
Yeah,
no, but that's all something a nutritional therapist could easily help you with.
Yeah.
So if you know you've got a snorer, that's definitely a sign.
I think I mean, I also observe the dark circles. You know, children should not be getting dark circles at all. So for me, that's definitely a sign that nutrition and sleep are not on par, predominantly nutrition and sleep as well, especially the micronutrient deficiencies and things like that. I mean, is there a certain number of hours of sleep that children should be getting? And does that vary as they get older and whatnot? And my daughter, now that she's 7, she's like, okay, Mommy, can I go to bed at 9 now? I'm like, no, you can go to bed at 7 instead of 6:30. I'm so mean.
I was exactly the same. So that, yes, there obviously are age groups where you would have certain numbers of hours, which then reduces as they get older. Very few teenagers have the recommended amount of sleep, which is around 9 hours.
9 hours. Okay.
Yeah, very few teenagers that I come across. So yes, there are kind of recommended, and as we know, you could either be one end of that spectrum or the other. So your child could naturally be a child who has a good sleep from 7 and wakes at 5, not wakes at 6 or 7. And so people think, oh, that must be something abnormal. What can I do? Well, it's because we're not ready to wake up at 5 and play. But actually, and thinking about circadian rhythm, that's probably a normal for them.
That's a very, very optimal actual, like, you know, like people go, what time do you put Nena to bed? And I'm like, I don't know, 5:30, 6, 6:30. And they look at me and they're like, what? And I'm like, she gets up at 5:36. She gets 12 hours. And they're like, oh, I said, but that we're all like that as a family. We go to bed early, we rise early, and it works really well for us. So you're right, that 7 to 5 pattern is actually very, very common. But
it does need to work with your family as well. So sleep is something that is different for each family. So depends where the child is sleeping, you know, who else is in the household. These are all factors that you have to take into account. We can't just think about the child as a single entity. And again, you know, in the NHS, I'm always trying to help families where they've got 3 or 4 siblings in one room and trying to negotiate that. And
how would you even do that? That's a great question, actually. It hasn't been asked, but I would love to know if you did say share a bedroom with a sibling that was maybe 3 or 4 years older than you. What would you say to the parents? That's a tough one.
It's pretty common. So yes, you do try and get one child to sleep, and then the other child needs to try and not disturb them when they come to bed. So, you know, that's just an easy practical thing you can think about doing. But then you've got that kind of sibling thing, oh, why aren't they going to bed and I've got to go to bed, sort of thing. So just having these clear boundaries and the children knowing this is what's expected, and at this age this is what's expected, and there are other things which go along with that age which I wouldn't be doing and wouldn't be expected to do as well. So there's good and bad about getting older, and you know, it's just kind of the psychology of it with children, because most children just want to play, don't want to go to sleep. That's the kind of common thing. So that's why this sleep routine, having this wind down process, is so important for them. And we try and instill it for when they're babies, you know, the bath bed story kind of thing.
What would older children, like, obviously, when you're a bit older, what would you recommend as that wind down thing anyway?
But actually bath and sleep and read are a good thing to just keep going. So, you know, having something that they're reading which is not too stimulating, hopefully.
And ideally in a book as well, right? Not a backlit screen, which brings us on nicely to screens. And like generally, and feel free to like lash out and be angry or whatever. What are your thoughts on screens?
Well, I've actually had a bit of a change of heart.
That was too broad. What are your thoughts on the overuse of screens nowadays?
Yeah, I've had a change of heart over screens because I've come to understand how they can be beneficial.
Okay.
And how they can be almost needed by certain children. And the RCPCH has kind of put evidence around that, and that's what paediatricians are now all kind of beginning to understand, that it's not all bad and it's not all good. So judicious use where there are boundaries in terms of time, and when the screen goes off,
is and what kind of time would that generally be? Would you
generally, so we have the school day and then children coming home, and some children, and I always try and encourage a bit of outdoor activity in that period. So if they're doing a school club or sports club or something, or just go to the playground on the way home if that's a possibility, or if you do have the luxury of a garden, then chuck them out in the garden for a little while. And that just helps them to kind of de-stress from the day, if that's something that they're feeling at the end of the day. And some children need to just have time on their own, just with a screen. So it's not all children, but some children do need to just get out from having to interact with people and go to something where they can predict what's going to happen. They know that it's always going to be the same, and it takes their mind away from all of the things that they've been negotiating all day long. And they seem to benefit from having that opportunity to do that. So
that is so fascinating, because I definitely have a TV addiction, and my daughter definitely is following a little bit, and I decided to just cut it out for like, we're trying to trial it for like 2 weeks. I'm struggling because she can't let it go. She's like trying to negotiate with me. How about just 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? In the end, I just realized, and she needs me to not be there as well. Like, why? What's going on? What are you really watching? She's like, no. And she just said it. She's like, I just need some space, mummy. And I went, oh, okay.
It really is. It's a case of you're a bit passive when you're watching TV, and
letting it
characters who you kind of recognize and you know from when you were younger, so it's kind of calming for you. And we remember those children's programs when we came home from school were the thing that we all watched and talked about the next day. So that was the social,
actually, the social kind of stuff.
now that's been replicated in gaming, the social aspect. So for some children, the only time they're interacting with their friends is via a game. So that's their ability to socially interact. And again, it's not for all children, but we just have to be a little bit
when you say it like that, you know, you've got to just handle it with compassion, don't you? You have to realize that some children can't necessarily maybe make friendships the traditional way. Some children need to connect on a different level. I mean, the bigger thing, you know, of society and connections and stuff like that is not really within our realm as healers and doctors, but I see what you say. I see what you mean.
The timing of it is what affects your sleep. So by doing it earlier when they've come home from school, or you know, early part of the evening, and then knowing that that's when it stops at a certain point, that is important for the ability for your melatonin rise, for your body to just switch off from anything that's stimulating. So I think that's the key for screens and children. Now, some children are older and want to watch TV a bit later.
Yeah.
But at least if they're far away from a TV and it's not, you know, like having the screen.
I was just going to ask you, God, it's like we're reading each other's minds. Is there kind of one screen that you would prefer? So like, you know, Nana sometimes says, can I have the iPad? And I'm like, no, just watch it on TV and sit please on the sofa, which is like 2.5, 3 meters away, as opposed to this with the neck and all of that. So am I right in thinking that potentially a TV screen might be better than an iPad?
You want to just avoid the phone, the iPad and the laptop after a certain time. You know, the 90 is what they say, but I think it probably should be 2 hours.
You say 90 minutes before 2 hours. Okay, fine. And then how about like an actual hourly limit per age? I mean, I don't know if I'm making this up, but I don't know if I saw something like an hour per I don't know, half an hour per year or something like that. Like, what would you?
I mean, people have come up with these. I don't think that there's actually science behind them, but again, what works for you, for your child and for your family and for their development. So do they actually need to do some homework, which may involve screens? They, you know, what's needed for them and what's going to work in your family. Do you want everybody to just be off screens and having a discussion at certain times? Or, you know, there's no, I wouldn't say there's hard and fast rules about time. But then if you add it up over a week, that kind of gives you a clue. So if it's more than an hour a night and more than a couple of hours each day of the weekend, for any age, that's probably a bit too much. Just on gaming, I mean.
Oh no, I'm talking about normal TV. Okay.
Yeah,
so, that's quite helpful.
I think most of the work has been done on gaming because of that addiction, the addictive quality of certain games. And
gaming is a huge problem. That's a whole talk in itself, isn't it? Because it's about the addiction, it's about what they're seeing, and oh my
God. Then that's what's preventing a lot of our children from sleeping, especially the older
generation,
preteens and teens. So that's why it's important to just have some way of keeping boundaries around it.
You know, these blue blocker glasses and screens for laptops and stuff like that. Is that something? I mean, I was thinking about getting Nena a pair of, because one company does really nice children's ones. Plus she always wear glasses because she wants to copy me. I thought, I mean, do they work in children as well? Is that something you would ever recommend?
Definitely, we do recommend, particularly for older children who might need to do their work on a laptop later on.
Are there any good British brands that you know? I mean, none of us are getting money for this, by the way.
No, I can't remember the names, but there are several. And if you go to the high street to your optometrist, they recommend as well. And I would recommend having an eye test regularly if you're on screens a lot, because we know from lockdown, so many children ended up needing glasses and had headaches and had their sleep impacted. So obviously there were other reasons for sleep being impacted. So definitely get a regular checkup.
still about light. I've had a few questions asked about it on this forum, but also just generally, what about these little night lights for children? Now, when I was pregnant with my kid and I started reading about light, it was just like, no light, because it, even the little dots on the TV and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts? I know that some children just can't sleep without them.
Yeah, you have to balance it, because fear of the dark is a natural fear for children, and that fear could be too much for them to be able to fall asleep. So that it might be that they need to have that security of knowing that it's not pitch black in my room as they fall asleep. And then maybe you can switch it off after that, or you keep one which is a red light, so it's not a blue light.
Yeah,
it's not the type of light that's going to affect. And I think more and more that, a good quality night light isn't going to have any of the stimulatory light.
Oh, that's good. I mean, how about moonlight then? Like on a night, say maybe if a parent is trying to wean their child off the night light because they haven't got the red light, for example, or they just want to wean him off anyway. Now he's like 21 years old and he's still got the night light on. Like, could you maybe alternate on a nice clear night, maybe have the curtains open a little bit? That's a bit of natural light.
Definitely. If you have a window that looks out into the sky without any other lights, problem is London, we have so much light pollution, so you're going to be looking at street lights if you open the windows.
Of course, and that's definitely not.
Yeah, you need to balance it. So
I guess sometimes the parents can also just do little experiments. There's definitely no harm in just switching off that night light, like doing it suddenly, right? So like maybe they put the child to bed and it's on the lowest setting, and it's in a red light mode as well, and then when the parents go to bed, they sneak into the room and they turn it off, or something like that as well. Because what you're saying is balance is crucial, of course, and we want the child to get some sleep, but in an ideal world, we don't. Am I right in thinking like we don't want light in our room in an ideal world?
We want to avoid light. We want the room as dark as possible. We want the temperature of the room to be optimal.
Just going to ask you about the temperature. What kind of a temperature would you recommend? Because I know me, I love the room really, really boiling, and I know it's not healthy.
Yeah, I do say 18 optimal temperature.
Stop it.
Well, we know that your body does need to cool down, so that's why the bath and then going to bed, because you are warm from a bath or shower, and then you're cooling down after you come out. So that's one of the reasons.
I didn't realize it was the warm and then the cooling.
Yeah.
And then you've also mentioned things you can put in the bath as well. That would help.
Oh yeah, we love our Epsom salts. So I tell most families, if they're having a bath, why not chuck in a good cup full of Epsom salts? We're going to naturally absorb some magnesium, which we know is like a muscle melter. So if you are carrying any muscular tensions, that relaxes them, but you're also absorbing some magnesium, which you need for your sleep induction. So
is that what the magnesium does? It kind of helps with the starting process. I didn't know that.
And for your neurotransmitter function as well. So you want to be able to make the melatonin. You also need other hormones in sleep. It's not just melatonin. We only ever talk about melatonin, don't we?
What are the other main hormones then?
You need dopamine, you need
cortisol to be low, GABA, yes, of course.
Acetylcholine. So there's all other neurotransmitters, and we know that the key nutrients for those include magnesium and B vitamins. So at least if we're getting a good supply of those, then you're going to help those pathways to function. And so sometimes a nighttime snack is needed.
Yeah, like what would you recommend?
One of the other reasons they nighttime wake is because their blood sugar has dropped. And so for children, we always try and keep that blood sugar balance steady, not only for sleep, but also for their mood, behavior, learning through the day, energy levels. So by keeping the blood sugar steady during the day, you're probably more likely to keep them steady through the night. But some children need a few more regular kind of snacks. So they might need an evening snack. So you would then think about having a snack with some carbohydrates, which are slow release, and some protein. So some people have that kind of early meal and then we'll have a snack later on.
Maybe like some nut butter on some crackers.
Yeah, so if you include the things foods which are high in things like B vitamins, you're going to help your serotonin and melatonin production.
Are there any foods?
As well. Yeah.
I was just thinking, oh my God, like seriously, you and me are like properly in sync today. Are there any, or, I mean, we know that we're obvious foods like sugar and stuff like that, but how about non-obvious foods that parents should possibly try and avoid in the evening, or in the evening meal, or as a snack?
Try and avoid or
Yes,
include.
yes, avoid.
So, yes, obviously you want to avoid a sugar high after dinner. You want it to be a steady release. So having if you are having something sweet, having it as part of the meal is better
Yes.
than having a few chocolate biscuits late, which is again, it's a kind of a habit that we have that, oh, you've had dinner, okay, you're hungry an hour or two later, we'll have some biscuits or have some whatever, which is high sugar. So rather than doing that, having something sweet with the meal, and then if you want to have a snack later, having it more of a savory snack.
Yeah.
Or a combined, so like, you know, banana or oat cakes with nut butter or something is a good combined snack. And the other things to avoid, well, we know about caffeine sort of drinks.
Caffeine drinks, I mean, I didn't know, like even energy drinks have an age limit on them now.
Energy drinks are awful. They're hugely high in caffeine. They were all hugely high in sugar. Now there's sugar-free versions, and then they have things like taurine and all these stimulants. So it's a kind of fashion for kids.
Why are they still available to minors? I mean, they're probably as dangerous as alcohol, you know, in some respects. And
there's a lot of issues with those. And children would have it on the way to school and the way from school, because obviously they pop in the shops. And
how about the ones that aren't classically labeled as energy drinks, like Monster and Water? How about like your Lucozades, or even like some of your bottled like Ribenas and stuff like that? I mean, how are they? I mean,
yeah, I mean, they're going to give you a sugar burst. The only things are Coke, which has obviously got caffeine, and then there are foods like chocolate obviously has caffeine as well. And we know that we have genetic ability to break down caffeine, and some people aren't such good metabolizers of caffeine, and that could be true for your child. And if they're a child who naturally loves their chocolate and might have some Cokes, or might even drink tea, we come across children who drink tea.
I mean, our children should children really have caffeine? Like, I mean, a little bit here and there, fine, but like I wouldn't even have thought of parents trying to moderate their child's caffeine intake, because to me it just is like, children don't drink caffeine, do they? I mean, you're the pediatrician, obviously they do.
Yeah, they do. Wow. And again, we don't have so much jurisdiction of what kids do who are older and going out of the house and buying their own things.
That's true.
But just educating them,
and
help understand.
So we've talked a little bit about screens, we've talked a little bit about food. Any kind of final top tips before we shoot off that you could kind of give us, just to make sure that your child is really, really getting a lovely restorative healing sleep? I mean, that is something that I wish that everybody could understand, that it's not just some random thing. It is like this amazing medicine. And if we saw it like that, we would happily continue to, most people do really well when their kids are young. And I think part of that is probably a wee bit maybe selfish. They don't want to wake up at night. But actually, as their kids are getting older and they're no longer being disturbed, there's less. I mean, I know loads of my friends who've got teenage kids who've got screens and they're taking them to bed, and I'm just like, just get, they're 13, just take that phone off them. Just put it downstairs.
Switch off the Wi-Fi.
I say that all the time. Switch the Wi-Fi off at the bit. Yeah, but then I go and use my phone. I'm like, there's the real problem. So,
I think sleep is, as I said, it's the best free medicine you can have for your life. But there's also another free medicine, which is exercise, which links into sleep so nicely, because we know that the more physical activity a child does earlier in the day, that kind of adds minutes to their sleep, and also it reduces that induction of sleep as well. So they're much more likely to go nicely into that deep sleep if they've done a good amount of physical activity during the day. And again, for younger children, they naturally do a fair amount if they're in school and then doing extra activities, but that reduces as they get older. And unless your teen is really into sports, there's a lot of teens who do really very little physical activity. So just being mindful of that.
Is there a certain amount? Again, I'm not really a proponent of amounts and evidence. It's not who I am as a person, okay? But generally, like,
I mean, there are those public health.
Yeah, I know, 3 hours a day or something. And I'm like, on what planet do you think a child who goes to school and has a working parent, is she going to get 3 hours of exercise a day? I mean, I'd love her
3
to.
hours is for toddlers, but then an hour a day at least for
Okay.
most school-age children. And so
And would something like a Nintendo, what they call the tennis ones and all this kind of stuff, when it's raining and grey and freezing cold, I mean, what can the parents do to get their kids, you know, active? And should they also make sure they're not doing it too soon before bed as well? I know with adults, I do advise.
That's why I like the sort of habit of doing activity just at the end of the school day. Because it not only releases any sort of stress hormones that might be there, but it also is a good timing in terms of you don't want to be too stimulated before bed. So, you know, some people say, oh, I just let them go off onto the trampoline if they're lucky to have one, or they might, if they're indoors, they might do one of those dance videos, TikTok, talk about that. At least they're doing physical activity. They're practicing, they're dancing, and actually they practice so many times that they're actually doing maybe an hour of dance, which is great.
There you go. I get Nena to just run, and I'm very lucky. I've got a 100-foot garden. I just make her run. She loves a competition. So I'm like, right, come on, up, down, 12 seconds. Right, now do it in 10, and that's it. Just give her a competition.
Right. I love that.
You know it. She's like 40 minutes. She's like, oh, Mummy, have I done enough? I'm like, yeah, finally now.
Or using in the short term something like a step counter, or, you know, something that gives them that feeling of, oh, I've beat my score from yesterday.
They do like a competition, don't they? Kids do. I think it's just like something to give themselves.
So definitely exercise. And then the other big subject, which is linked to sleep, is your gut health. So all the factors which promote a good gut in terms of microbiome are going to help sleep as well, because it's interrelated, your gut and your brain, and you're making those neurotransmitters there as well, and you're biotransforming the B vitamins and the nutrients that are needed for those pathways. Wonderful. So again, another subject which I'm sure you're
going to say, that's going to be another video with you, my love. The gut microbiome is just huge, and it's one of my favorites. I've just recorded a video today for seed wellness and doing this whole thing on plant power, and I had to think, I mean, it was not easy thinking about my favorite plants, but in the top 5 of my favorite plants were all the kind of fermented vegetables and all of these kind of, you know, really, really natural foods that just feed all of those beautiful good guys in our stomach.
So that's why we have things like, from Ayurveda, we have the golden milk, you know, the warm milk with turmeric. Yeah. That again, it's partly because it's good for your gut microbiome. So there's lots of reasons why there are these practices that.
How could you make that a bit more palatable for a child, for example? Because turmeric is not the most tastiest of thing. And how would you, I know there's thousands of recipes, but just give us a quick, your own recipe for it.
We would use probably almond milk. Yeah. Or oat milk, and then you would add cinnamon, which kind of gives that sweetness, and it just takes the edge off the bitterness. Yeah. And if you use an organic turmeric, it's slightly less bitter. So that helps as well. And you might want to strain it if there are sort of bits of the powder, because. Could
you open a turmeric capsule, or could you put in some of the stuff you cook with? Is that enough? Isn't it the
organic when you're, you know, the one you cook with? I use that one, but you know, you can. And then a tiny bit of black pepper, and that should be enough to help you.
Black pepper. I know that that's needed to activate the curd. I know that, but I'm just trying to imagine a child drink. But I guess you could put a bit of like a natural unrefined sugar in, a little bit, like gur or
honey, basically.
Honey, yeah.
So just to take that, give it that sweet.
That's something to try.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other wonderful words of wisdom that you want to impart on sleep, screens? Yeah.
So I mean, I think it often applies for younger children, but as parents, we can get quite worried about children who are young not sleeping alone. And to be honest, it's not natural for them to sleep alone. So not to think that, oh, it's terrible, they won't sleep without me. That's their nature. Their nature is to want to be with you as a parent, to have that physical closeness, that comfort. So obviously do what works for you as a family and in terms of your own sleep, but don't feel that you're doing something wrong if you're co-sleeping or if you're, sitting with them as they go off to sleep. That's not a wrong thing to do. And yeah, there's a lot of good people who are writing about this. So I speak on a course by Lindsay Hookway, who's the holistic sleep coach, and she trains a lot of sleep coaches. And that's her whole ethos, is that actually let's go with nature rather than trying to fight against nature, and just accepting.
I could kiss you. I mean, I have a
Oh.
7-year-old and we're still co-sleeping.
Yeah.
Me and my ex-husband decided when she was born that she would sleep with us for sure, for at least 2 years minimum in our bed. Hence we got a super king. She's just stayed in there. But I have read so much studies and so much science, like especially if you look at countries like Japan and India and Asia, where kids are co-sleeping, they're 12-year-old. But that closeness, that nurturing that they get, they're never going to get that again. Then they're not going to hopefully be asking you at 22 to jump into your bed with you. But if I can 0 to 12, whilst I'm single, I'm not sharing my bed with anyone else. It's not a big deal for me. I love it. She loves it. And it's given us a really, really good bond. And I remember having a conversation with someone about this, and he was quite negative. It's like, but why would you do that? God, she's going to be so so dependent on you. And I kind of looked at him and I went, you ain't met my kid. She's one of the most independent, feisty, confident kids I know. So I'm not taking her independence away. I'm just nurturing her. I'm an earth mother, and it works for me. And and that's
why
really nice.
Well, we all need hugs because of the oxytocin.
The body contact is huge, absolutely massive. And I just think, so that's really reassuring. Thanks, Venita. What you basically said is that if you're one of those parents who has to basically lie with your child and stroke them till they fall asleep, as hard as it may be for you as the parent, it's actually not doing any harm to your kid. And if anything, it's probably helping them.
Yeah,
that's really nice to know. I mean, it's not easy for
it's not the popular opinion for paediatricians to say, probably, or health visitors, but actually from what I've read and studied, I'm still sticking with it.
Ditto. And to me, it just makes sense. I mean, I think if you asked 100 5-year-olds, do you want to sleep with your mum or dad? They'll be like, yeah,
definitely.
Ask them when they're 7, it'll be the same thing. So if something as simple as sleeping with your parents can give you that much joy, can you imagine, as you said, all that dopamine, all that oxytocin? Exactly. I can feel it when I've got my arms wrapped around Nan. I can just feel her just breathing very calmly, and me. And when we have trialed her being a grown-up and sleeping in her own bed, I haven't liked it as much, so win-win.
Yeah, just go with your intuition when it comes to your own child, because not all children want to be with someone, but a lot of them do.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely thing to end on, is that intuition around your parenting. I think we have unfortunately taken away a lot of the power of intuition, parental intuition, old wisdom, all of this kind of stuff, which I think deserves a lot more accolades than some of this. You are the expert
and your child.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Venita, thank you so much. That was really helpful. Honestly, I know for me, I've learned loads. And so now I know that I think a lot of my friends and audience will feel more happy about their child's nightlight being on. Hopefully a few select friends will take those phones away from their teenage daughters and children now. You can only but hope, right?
It was great talking to you. And I look forward to hearing more of your chats.
Absolutely. Well, you're going to be coming again. There's children's health is just massive. So, I'm putting it out there to my audience and my followers and Venita's followers. What do you want to know about? Hit us up, DM us, tell us. We got a lot of experience between us both. We're both mothers, and it'll be lovely to just help you. Just nurture, give back, and educate as well.
Definitely.
All right, my darlings, all of you, I'm going to just say bye-bye to the. All right.